What is Unitarian Universalism? By Unitarian Universalist Edward Schempp. Unitarian Universalism is faith in people, hope for tomorrow's child, confidence in a continuity that spans all of time. It looks not to a perfect heaven, but towards a good earth. It is respectful of the past, but not limited to it. It is trust in growing and conspiracy with change.
Edward Schempp writes, Unitarian Universalism is confidence in the continuity that spans all time. It is respectful of the past, but not limited to it. It is trust in growing and conspiracy with change. When I first stumbled upon Unitarian Universalism, I was smitten. I fell so deeply, deeply in love with this faith. A faith that welcomed me as I was. Wholly me. I didn't have to hide any part of who I was. I was told that I was loved just as I was. And to a young gay man who had been forced out of his religion of origin, I can't tell you how huge that was. I also loved that I didn't need to leave my brain at the door. I could bring all my rational thinking, irrational thinking, all my doubts, all my questions, all my evolving answers and discoveries about life and spirituality. All of that, I was told, is welcome here. Here I could discover and shape and grow a spiritual life that felt authentic. Come as you are and join us on a shared spiritual adventure. Unitarian Universalism said I was not alone, but that I was connected to community. I was responsible with that community. Another thing that I loved about Unitarian Universalism when I first discovered it is I was told it was a living tradition. So a tradition in that we have historical roots that reach back 1,000, 2,000 years, but it's living, which meant it's not frozen in time. It can grow and deepen as change as our understanding of life and the universe grows and deepens and changes. I also felt that the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism were the perfect match for my beliefs. But they also set a challenging ethical pathway to become a better, more loving and caring person. So these are the 7 principles that I fell in love with 32 years ago, that many of us fell in love with. And I'm going to invite you to say them with me. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large, the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. A living tradition, which means recently when people and congregations began to feel that these 7 principles didn't explicitly call us to become anti-racist congregations. They said we needed more, and so on a grassroots level, this 8th principle emerged, and I think it's 256 congregations out of 1,000 have now approved a new 8th principle. And would you join with me in this? Journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Now, many of us thought that 8th principle language was a little too wordy, and it didn't flow like the previous 7 did. But we hoped that this was going to get revised when it was refashioned at the national level. So these are the 8 principles of Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno, but the larger 7 of our denomination. These 7 principles officially are outlined in Section 2 of the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association, which this congregation is a member of, along with 1,000 other congregations spread across the country. These national bylaws are so brilliant because they say that we must take a look at them every 15 years to see if they reflect who we need to be at this moment in time. Do they communicate our core values? Do they challenge us as we need to be challenged in this moment in time? Not 15 years ago, not 30 years ago, not 40 years ago. In short, we have to ask, are new words or challenges needed? I like that. Rather than being set in stone by people from the past, our UU faith challenges us to remain relevant to the times that we are in. We are a faith that is not afraid to evolve because we believe in evolution. Now, as we heard earlier, Unitarian Universalism is confidence in a continuity that spans all time. It is respectful of the past, but not limited to it. It is trust in growing, and conspiracy with change. Our principles, these principles were first adopted, not these principles, but the original principles were first adopted in 1961 when the Unitarians and the Universalists, who were 2 separate denominations, merged. And believe me, today, not one of us would be in this room if we were still using those original 1961 principles. They permeated with patriarchy. Just one example, in 1961, which you would have said, these are my principles. This is my belief. This was one of them. We unite in striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace. We encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. Okay, yay. Now, those original principles were completely revised in 1984 in a movement that was mostly led by women who cringed at that language but liked what was still at the heart of Unitarian Universalism. And dear ones, guess who opposed changing that language? White ministers, male ministers, and some male Unitarian Universalists. It was a fight to get language that some people thought was absolutely fine, but other folks said, no. The 1984 revision brought in language that was needed about gender equality. It had a bit more focus on community and an acknowledgement of the interdependency of all life. That seventh principle that we love so much, the interconnected web, the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Well, my dear ones, 40 years have passed since the last revision. Think about that. Some of us here today weren't even born in 1984. And for those of us that were here, I suspect that we've changed a lot and learned a lot over the course of 40 years. We are, in many ways, different than we were 40 years ago. I was thinking as I was driving here today, imagine if we were still styling our hair like we did in 1984. Some of us even had hair back in 1984. So, 1984, we've changed. The world that we're living is much more complex. Our understanding of race and intersectionality of oppression has changed. As the UUA points out, the Unitarian Universalist Association, they say, quote, recent events have caused Unitarian Universalists to explore more deeply institutional and cultural oppressions that exist in our association and in our congregations. We are now well into the first quarter of the 21st century. Our association has grown in its understanding of systemic oppressions such as racism, ableism, and heteronormative beliefs. However, many people feel the language we use in our principles does not reflect these learnings. Many Unitarian Universalists, and I know many of us here, still really struggle to explain to someone succinctly what Unitarian Universalism is. Many of our younger Unitarian Universalists feel that the seven principles aren't relevant to the Unitarian Universalism that these young folks are now shaping and living. It doesn't resonate with some of our young people. Many Unitarian Universalists who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color feel that the words lock us into the white supremacy culture in which they were originally shaped. They say that if we really want to be who we say we are, want to become, we want to be anti-racist, diverse, and intercultural, then we must have something new to follow in our future. The path of 40 years ago isn't going to go in that direction. We've already admitted that because we've added the eighth principle. One thing that was a real eye-opener for me, and it was a moment when I realized that as a white guy, I need to listen to other voices. I needed to see through other eyes. I heard a young Black Unitarian Universalist. She was a woman, and she said, "Your first principle, you affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person." And I was like, yeah, I love that. And, she looked us in the eyes, and she said, when I hear worth, I think of my ancestors who were sold into enslavement in auctions. So when you tell me I have worth, I'm sorry, that word causes trauma for me, and I don't feel like I belong. Others want a few words, just a few words, and that can be easily remembered, similar to our church's own mission statement, which is love inclusively, grow spiritually, serve gratefully, and work for justice. Some say our principles have too many words to easily remember them all. I expect there are very few people in the room who could recite all 8 principles. It's just too much. I know there's one person who will. Laura could, but some point out that our principles feel like a list, and they want something that shimmers with emotion and invites an experience and calls us into explicit action, not just thoughts, but actions. Some feel the principles stress individualism over community, and dear ones, in these divided times, we need community more than ever. Others point out strangely, that our current framework for defining our faith leaves out the one word that many of us believe is central to our faith. Does anybody notice what word is missing from our 7 or 8 principles? Love. We say love is the center, is the covenant of this church, and yet our denomination does not say that anywhere in our self-definition. Following the bylaws requirement that we review Article 2 every 15 years led to the formation of a national working group to study if now was the time for a revision. Again, this happened nationally, involving Unitarian Universalists nationwide. The working group talked to Unitarian Universalists from across the country and invited a year of conversation that was thrilling and invigorating. People talking about what was Unitarian Universalism. And from what they heard and felt, they crafted a draft of something new that still has the spirit of the 7 principles and preserves many of the most beloved words. We are not erasing the words that we love. We're just reframing them a little with a different framework. I presented this draft in a sermon this past August, followed by congregational discussion that everyone was invited to come to, followed by another sermon in the fall on our sources. Our Board of Trustees had multiple discussions on the current draft, as did our team committee council twice. The team leads were encouraged to discuss the revisions in their own individual teams. In preparation for today, we offered 5 different discussion opportunities open to all who wanted to engage. In addition, all church members receive the magazine, the national magazine, UU World. There were multiple articles on Article 2 delivered directly to our homes during the last 2 years. The proposed revisions in Article 2 will be voted on at our upcoming National General Assembly next month. Let's take a look at these revisions. The first revision is to explicitly put love at the center of our faith. And so our new framework begins with a preamble that states up front, and could you share these words with me? Let's read them together. The purpose of the Unitarian Universalist Association is to actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love. We're saying it right up front. We are often asked, what holds Unitarian Universalists together when our beliefs are different? We are now direct. We are explicit. The revision says, next slide, and will you read this with me? Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Then come 2 big revisions. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth. I confess my first reactions a year and a half ago included some very unministerial words. I put up the shutters and said, I don't want to look at this, I don't want change, because I love my 7 principles, my 8 principles, and because change can be hard. But I came to realize that we're not losing anything, we're just revising what we already have. The first big revision, the principles have evolved into values. Our 7 or 8 principles have evolved into 6 shared values. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are. And then comes the second big revision. We wanted a way to quickly and simply show that love was at the center of Unitarian Universalism, surrounded by those 6 values. So before we see a lot of words, and Unitarian Universalists love, love, love lots of words, so we're not solely language-based, because some of us are visual learners. We get a graphic. We get a visual representation of who we collectively aspire to be as Unitarian Universalists, and here it is. Love is at the center. with our flaming chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, surrounded by 6 values. And you read these with me, starting with interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. So, we start out simply and clearly. Anyone new looking at us is going to get a sense, just from the beginning, of who we are. Then we go deeper. We get more specific using a 3-part framework. First, we get the value, so it gives us that word. Then we define the value, so we know what it is. And then we get the covenant or aspiration we work together to receive. This is how we make the value come alive. This is how we are held accountable. Now, I want to let you know what we've been doing this year, introducing this to brand new folks to the church. We just share the value and the definition. You all received a card when you walked in today. That's in our visitor's packet. You see the value, you see the definition. That's Unitarian Universalism. This 3rd level is for how do we make it come true? That's kind of for the folks who say, okay, yeah, sign me up, I want to be here. Then we say, okay, this is the hard part. The first part is what we believe. This is what we do. So, knowing that the definition for new folks is enough, and then moving into the covenant for deeper engagement, I'm going to invite you to read these values with me, these definitions, and these covenants. So we begin with interdependence, and can you say that? And continue. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place within it. That is the 7th principle becoming the first value. So that's our 7th principle that we love. And then we get the covenant. We covenant to protect earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of repair, mutuality, and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. I like that we begin by highlighting our interconnectedness and our critical need to protect Earth and all beings, because if we don't do that, the rest of this isn't going to matter at all. And then we move to a celebration of differences. Our next value is pluralism. And would you say with me the definition? We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. I don't see anything to argue with that. And then we say, how do we do this? How do we make it come alive? We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. That's our 4th principle. We did not lose our beloved free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And then we get explicitly what many of us come here for, what brings us through the door. The next value is justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. That is the 8th principle, that wordy 8th principle. It's been brought down into language that's usable. And then the covenant. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions in our congregations, our association, and the society at large. This is the 8th principle merged with the 9th principle, and they're making explicit nothing is going to come from the top down, not in our congregation, not in our association. We wish it wasn't happening in society at large, but the voice of the people, the votes of the people make a decision, which is why we vote on these proposed revisions. The next one is revolutionary. It's transformation, and please join me. We adapt to a changing world. We better adapt to a changing world if we're going to survive and be relevant. Our covenant. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically, Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. What religion do you know says that we're never complete and we're never going to be perfect? Which means not all these words are perfect. Not all these ideas are perfect. They're going to need to change over time. Our next, generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. Then we get the last value, equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. So there's the first principle. We don't lose it. We just change worth to worthiness. And then we take that first principle a step further. We just don't say you have inherent dignity and worthiness. We're saying you deserve to flourish. So it becomes very active. And then we say, we covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. So, these are the proposed key revisions. There are others as well, but this is the part of the matter. Last June at our National General Assembly, we voted 87% in favor of this language and of spending another year talking about and wrestling with these proposed revisions. Now, they're going to be voted on next month at our National Online General Assembly. The energy at General Assembly last June was overwhelmingly positive. You could feel it in the room, with our national leadership endorsing the revision. I enthusiastically endorse this revision. But I want to be really clear. We have the permission to love this or hate this, to feel so-so about it, to not be sure what we feel, or to feel sad or angry or happy or excited about this. I'm going to still love you no matter how you vote. We're going to still love each other no matter how we vote. Whether we decide to put into language love is the center of who we are, it's going to be there, and that love is for everyone. We have freedom of conscience, and that is a bedrock of Unitarian Universalism. But here's the thing. These are all just words. Some have changed, but the essence, the real essence of Unitarian Universalism is still here. What we know and love is still here. It's just some different words and some same words being used together. Words that might be here for a while, and then they too will change for another time and another relevancy. What is permanent is the essence and experience of Unitarian Universalism. We have confidence in a continuity that spans all time. I've watched newcomers this year in our introduction classes get really excited by these 6 values. It resonates in their hearts and minds. These folks exploring say, yes, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I already believe. And they're saying, yes, I want to come and be part of this community. We had another group yesterday, and I see you here today. They walk out of the introduction knowing explicitly love is at the center, and they walk out with 6 words, 6 values that capture Unitarian Universalism, and they can begin to use that in their lives immediately. But most importantly, and I'm just talking as Tim, many young Unitarian Universalists and Black, Indigenous, people of color, religious professionals, lay leaders, and members of congregations really want this. They really do. We say we want to invite young people and racial and cultural diversity and inclusion into our congregations. Many of those same folks are telling us they need this revision of language for their future. And they are the ones who will carry Unitarian Universalism into the next generation. General Assembly last year, about 150 high school students, the Youth Assembly, came forward and addressed the adults. If you had seen their faces, the excitement that these words and this revision brought to them was just breathtaking. And in right conscience, how could I say to them, I am so glad you love these Unitarian Universalism. I want you to be here. I want you to be here for your whole life. But you know what? You can only use the words that I want you to use. These are words that are 40 years old, and then we're going to say 50, 60, 70, 100, 200. That sounds like the church I left. That begins to sound almost like a creed. That's not what I want to give our young people. I want to give them something that excites them, that they will live into. So today, after the service at our annual meeting, church members have a chance to vote yes or no on these revisions. How we vote this afternoon will direct how our church delegates vote next month in the national vote. As we vote, may we remember, Unitarian Universalism is confidence in a continuity that spans all time. It is respectful of the past, but not limited to it. It is trust in growing and conspiracy with change. Que así sea, bendito sea. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.